I'll never forget the moment I realized the ER wasn't just a place where people came to get stitched, scanned, or stabilized. No. It was a portal into human chaos, human fear, human stupidity, and human mystery, sometimes all at once. And if you stay long enough behind those automatic sliding doors, if you spend enough nights under flickering fluorescent lights, you start to understand a truth that nobody warns you about in nursing school. Some cases don't just stay in the ER. Some cases follow you home. Some cases stay in your head. And a few, you can't even explain. That's why whenever someone asks me, "What's the strangest thing you've ever seen at work?" I always laugh a little, because how do you pick? How do you choose just one when you've seen things so bizarre they blur the line between real life and nightmares? So today, I'll tell you 7. The 7 strangest, oddest, most unforgettable things I've seen in my years as an ER nurse. And trust me, these aren't the kind of stories you hear on medical shows or viral TikToks. These are the ones that stay locked behind the curtains of trauma rooms, whispered about at 3 a.m. between nurses over stale coffee. The kind that make you rethink how normal people really are. Before I get into the first one, let me start with a hook. Because if you think you've heard weird ER stories before, I promise, you haven't heard mine. In fact, one of the strangest nights of my life started with a man who walked in holding a sealed Tupperware container like it was holy relic. He didn't say his name. He didn't sign in. He just placed the Tupperware on the triage counter, slid it toward me, and whispered, "It's alive." Yeah. That was my shift that day. So buckle up. I was only 2 years into the job, still in that stage where adrenaline feels like fuel and you think you're ready for anything, but nothing prepared me for what was inside that Tupperware. When the man pushed it toward me, his hands were shaking, not lightly, but with this frantic tremor that made me think he was either terrified, on drugs, or both. The lid was wrapped in duct tape, layers of it, like he was trying to stop something from getting out, and the rattling. I remember the rattling. A soft thud, thud, thud from inside, like something was moving, or trying to. I looked at my charge nurse, hoping she'd step in and take over, but she was too busy pretending to type something important on the computer. Typical. So I did what nurses do when no one else wants to. I swallowed my fear, kept my face neutral, and asked, "Sir, what's inside the container?" He leaned in, eyes wide, pupils dilated, and whispered, "The government won't believe me. But I need you to. I need you to tell them it's real when they come for it." Now, every ER nurse has encountered a few conspiracy theorists, people convinced they're being surveilled, chipped, tracked, hunted by everything from the CIA to aliens. But this man's fear was too real, too raw, and the thing inside the container was still tapping. I slowly reached for gloves, because you don't touch anything suspicious in the ER with bare hands unless you want your obituary to include the phrase, "cause of death, curiosity." I peeled back one side of the duct tape, and immediately something inside slammed against the lid hard enough to make me flinch. "What the?" I jerked my hands back. The man screamed, "Be careful, it knows!" Half the people in the waiting room turned to stare. A security guard started walking over. My brain whispered, "Oh great, this is how I die." Murdered by whatever's inside a Walmart Tupperware container. Finally, with help from security, we got the lid off, and when I looked inside, I nearly burst out laughing. It was a squirrel. A tiny, furious squirrel, teeth bared, soaked in something sticky, eyes darting like it was plotting revenge. Apparently, the man found it outside his house, convinced it was some kind of mutated government experiment, because, in his words, it stared directly into my soul. What really happened was that the squirrel was stuck in an energy drink can and was now wired like it had consumed enough caffeine to restart a dead car battery. Security took it outside. The man demanded we call the CDC. We politely declined, and I started my shift with a mental note. Add rogue caffeinated squirrel incident to the growing list of ER absurdities. But that wasn't even close to the strangest thing I've seen. Fast forward to another night. Full moon, of course, because ER chaos always synchronizes with lunar activity. We all joke about it, but ask any nurse. The weirdest patients always come out on full moons. That night, a guy walked in holding his stomach like he was in agony. His breathing was shallow. Sweat poured down his forehead. I rushed him back, thinking appendix, perforation, maybe internal bleeding. We patched him to monitors, prepped labs, got him undressed, and then we saw it. He had a fork, a dinner fork, inside his abdomen. Not like stabbed. No, like inserted, vertically. I blinked so hard my eyelashes practically clapped. Turns out, after losing a drunken bet at a barbecue, his friends dared him to swallow something metal. He chose a fork because he thought the prongs would fold like a taco on the way down. They didn't. Shockingly. He ended up requiring emergency surgery, and we still tell that story whenever someone new joins the team. You know, as a casual, trauma-bonding ritual. Then there was the teenage girl who came in convinced she had a parasite living in her eye because she saw something moving in her peripheral vision. She had been staring at herself in the mirror for an hour straight, terrified, crying, hands shaking, too scared to blink. I braced myself for a worst-case scenario. Some rare infection, maybe larvae, something that actually does happen more often than you want to believe in this job. But when we finally examined her eye carefully, we discovered the truth. Her contact lens was cracked. Just cracked. A tiny piece had folded back, and the rest was sliding across her cornea like a little translucent eyelid. She thought it was alive. Her mother thought we were heroes for saving her from blindness. Meanwhile, I was thinking, please, universe, give me one normal patient today. But the universe doesn't listen to ER nurses. Another night, I remember because it was shortly after Halloween, a man burst through the doors carrying his girlfriend in his arms like some dramatic romance movie scene, except instead of roses or violins, there was screaming. A lot of screaming. She had her hands cupped over her face, blood seeping through her fingers. We rushed her into a trauma bay, and she wailed that her face was melting. When she finally moved her hands, we saw the problem. Her fake vampire fangs had melted onto her real teeth, literally fused. The cheap plastic had bonded so tightly that trying to remove them without softening the material first risked ripping out half her actual teeth. She kept shouting, "I didn't know they were supposed to come off before I drank the hot toddy." And I kept trying not to laugh because she was obviously in pain, but also, come on. Dentistry had to come down. They used heated tools, solvents, and a level of patience I will never possess. After 2 hours, the fangs were removed. The boyfriend fainted. Twice. And she left with a warning to never mix boiling alcohol and dollar store Halloween props again. But listen, those cases were bizarre, hilarious, strange, yes. But they weren't the ones that unsettled me. They weren't the ones that kept me awake after my shift, replaying every detail in my head. Those are the ones I'm getting to now. There was a man once, middle-aged, calm, polite, articulate, who walked into the ER asking for help because he believed he was turning into someone else. Not metaphorically. He meant physically. He said his reflection had been shifting little by little, his chin sharper, his eyes darker, his shoulders narrower. He spoke in a steady voice, almost conversational, explaining that he was losing ownership of his body. When he looked at his own hands, he said they didn't feel like his. He didn't feel connected to them. It wasn't drugs. His toxicology screen came back clean. No alcohol. No psychiatric history. No neurological red flags. And yet, the way he described his symptoms shook me. He wasn't hallucinating. He wasn't delusional in the typical sense. It was dissociation, likely severe, maybe catalyzed by stress or trauma he didn't disclose. But when he looked at me and whispered, I'm afraid that when the transformation is complete, I won't be me anymore. I felt something in my stomach twist. I stayed with him until psych arrived, and as they walked him to their unit, he didn't fight. He just turned to me, eyes empty, and said, "If I never come back, remember me as I am now, not as the person who takes my place." I still don't know what happened to him. Sometimes ER stories begin in our hands and end somewhere we'll never see, but that one haunts me. Then, the child. Pediatrics always hits harder, no matter how long you've been in this field. One night, a little boy came in with his parents, completely silent, not crying, not talking, not reacting to anything. He just stared straight ahead, breathing slowly, eyes glassy. His mother said he woke up like that, unresponsive but awake, staring at the wall. No fever, no injury, no illness in the family. Nothing unusual the day before. He was perfectly healthy, until he wasn't. We tried everything: stimuli, light, sound, touch. Nothing. His vitals were normal. His scans were clean. His labs were perfect. He just wasn't there. It was like someone had unplugged his consciousness, but left the body powered on. Hours later, while a neurologist was evaluating him, the boy suddenly turned his head, locked eyes with me, and whispered so softly I thought I imagined it. "He's still in my room." I froze. His mother asked, "Who, sweetheart? Who's in your room?" But he wouldn't answer. He just closed his eyes and started crying silently. Still no sound, no sobbing, just tears streaming down his face. We admitted him for observation. By morning, he was talking again, laughing, eating breakfast like nothing had happened. He didn't remember a thing, not a second. And his parents begged everyone to tell them it was just a nightmare. But that sentence, I'll never forget it. The ER shows you medical emergencies, yes, but sometimes it shows you things that feel like they belong in a different dimension entirely. And speaking of dimensions, this next one isn't supernatural, but it might be the most unbelievable thing I've ever seen. A man came in with stomach pain so severe he could barely walk. We assumed gallbladder, pancreatitis, something routine. But when imaging came back, the doctor squinted, shook his head, and said, "No way. That's not real." It was. He had swallowed 27 magnets. 27. When we asked why he did it, he shrugged and said, "I wanted to see if I could make my stomach attract metal objects. Sir, I'm a nurse, not a physics professor, but I can tell you now, that's not how anything works." The magnets had started clumping together inside his intestines, pinching tissue between them like little metal traps. He was rushed to surgery before they caused perforations. He survived, thankfully, but he also earned himself a permanent spot in our "What in the world were you thinking?" Hall of Fame. By this point in my career, I thought I'd seen everything. Truly. But the ER loves proving me wrong. And the seventh story, the one I'll tell in part 2, that one is the strangest of them all. Stranger than the caffeinated squirrel. Stranger than the body-transforming man. Stranger than the silent child. Stranger than magnets and forks and melting vampire fangs. Because that seventh story didn't just stay at work. It followed me home. I wish I could say the seventh story was just another bizarre shift. Another case we shrugged off during handover as we rolled our chairs away from the nurse's station, joking that the ER should come with a laugh track. But the seventh story was different. It was the kind of case that made me feel watched long after my shift ended. The kind that lingered in my head, even when I tried to convince myself it was nothing. The kind that made the hair on my arms stand up when I thought about it alone at night. It started around 2:40 a.m., when the ER was in that strange, quiet limbo, after the bar fights, before the early morning rush, that eerie space where the world feels still but not peaceful. I was restocking a trauma cart when I noticed a woman standing at the entrance, not coming in, not calling for help, just standing there, motionless. Her posture was too stiff, too straight, like she was bracing herself against a storm only she could see. I watched her for maybe 20 seconds before walking toward her. Something about her made me uneasy. She wasn't panicking. She wasn't confused. She wasn't injured. She was just still. Frozen in a way people normally aren't. I approached slowly, ready to do the standard greeting, ask what brought her in, maybe guide her gently inside before security intervened unnecessarily. But when I got closer, I noticed her eyes weren't following me. They weren't blinking. They weren't moving at all. Her pupils were fixed, straight ahead, slightly dilated. Her chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, but her gaze was unnervingly static. I said softly, "Ma'am, do you need help?" Her lips twitched. Just a tiny tremor, like she was trying to speak, but something held her back. I stepped in front of her to get a better look, and that's when I saw it. Tears were pouring down her face, not dripping, pouring. A steady stream running from both eyes with no facial expression to match. She didn't look sad. She didn't look scared. She didn't look anything. Her face was blank, completely emotionless, and yet the tears kept coming. I felt a cold ripple crawl up my spine. I touched her hand gently. It was ice cold. "Ma'am, can you look at me?" Her lips parted, no sound. Her jaw trembled slightly like she was fighting against invisible restraints. I called for a wheelchair, and with help from another nurse, we guided her in. Her body moved, but her head stayed perfectly straight. Even while turning corners, even while going through doors, her neck refused to move. We got her into a room. The doctor on shift joined us. Vitals normal. No fever. No pain response. No drugs detected. Blood pressure steady. Oxygen fine. Neurological reflexes intact. But her eyes stayed fixed. It was like she couldn't look away from something directly in front of her, something only she could see. When we dimmed the lights for a neurological check, that's when everything became horrifying. Her tears glowed. Not like neon or light bulbs. Nothing sci-fi. But in the low light, her tears reflected something metallic, almost iridescent, like the sheen you see on oil when sunlight hits it just right. The doctor looked at me. I looked at him. Neither of us said anything, but the silence felt heavy. We tried again to question her, asking if she had taken anything unusual, been exposed to chemicals, had a recent trauma. Nothing. She didn't respond. She didn't blink. And then, just as suddenly as she arrived, everything changed. She turned her head. Not gradually. Not like a normal person who finally reacts after a period of shock. Her head snapped toward me so fast that I jumped back instinctively, hand flying to my chest. Her eyes locked onto mine, wide and glassy, and her voice, hoarse, cracked, raw, finally emerged. "He's behind you." I swear every muscle in my body froze. Nurses are trained to handle panic, delusions, hallucinations, psychosis. But something about the way she said it didn't feel like any of that. Her voice wasn't frantic. It wasn't confused. It wasn't scared. It was certain. The doctor, standing behind me, sighed and said, "I'm right here," assuming she meant him, but she shook her head, tears still streaming, and whispered, "No, not him." I turned around despite every instinct telling me not to. Of course, nothing was there. Just the empty room, the dim light, the shadows pooled under the counter. But the woman inhaled sharply, like watching invisible movement. Then she screamed. It wasn't a scream from pain or fear. It was the kind of sound someone makes when their mind snaps in half. She clawed at her scalp, tearing tufts of her own hair, thrashing so violently that security had to come in and hold her down gently while we sedated her. Even after the medication hit, she kept whispering with slurred speech, "He's behind you. He's behind you. Don't turn around." We admitted her to psych. I went home shaken, exhausted, replaying her words and the intensity behind them. I slept with the lights on that morning. I told myself it was just an acute psychotic break. Nothing more. Just another ER night. But the next day, her husband came in. He looked frantic, sweating, hands gripping the counter so tightly his knuckles were white. He asked if we had seen his wife. When I confirmed she'd been admitted, he started crying, not out of relief, but out of dread. "She's been seeing him for weeks," he said. I didn't believe her. I thought it was sleep deprivation or anxiety or something I could fix. But last night, she woke up screaming. She said she couldn't shut her eyes, because if she blinked, he would move closer. I felt nauseous. I asked him gently, "Who does she think she's seeing?" He swallowed hard and said, "A man with no face." Not disfigured, not scarred, no face, no features, just a humanoid shape with a blank surface where his face should be. And according to her, he would appear only when she was alone, standing behind her reflection, or in doorways, or in corners. The husband asked me, trembling, Did she say anything about him being here?" I didn't know what to say. Nurses aren't supposed to encourage delusions. We're supposed to redirect, reorient, reassure. But that woman's stare, her glowing tears, the certainty in her voice, it all came crashing back. I lied. I said, "No. She didn't mention anything like that." He thanked me and left with shaking hands. That night, I kept glancing over my shoulder every time I walked down an empty hallway. You know that feeling where your instincts scream that someone is behind you even when you know logically you're alone? Yeah, that was me. But the story didn't end there. 2 nights later, around 3:15 a.m., I was doing charting at the back station. Lights dim. Everyone tired and quiet. The automatic doors at the front entrance slid open with that familiar hiss. No one entered. We all looked up, expecting maybe a patient walking slowly, or an ambulance coming in behind them. But the hallway remained empty. The doors closed again. A minute later, they opened again. This time, when they slid apart, every hair on my neck stood up. I can't explain why. There was nothing visible. Just the sterile hallway, the same one I've walked 1,000 times. But something felt wrong. Like the air was heavier, like the shadows were thicker, like someone invisible had just stepped inside. One of the nurses laughed nervously and said it was probably a sensor glitch, but then the doors stayed open, not frozen, not malfunctioning, just open, like they were holding for someone who wasn't stepping through. I don't scare easily, but I stood up and walked closer, forcing myself to be rational. When I reached the doorway, the air on my skin felt cold. Not AC cold, not winter cold, a different cold, a hollow cold. And then, far down the hall, at the intersection where the lights sometimes flickered, I saw something, a silhouette, not a person, just a shape, tall, still, featureless. I blinked. Gone. You know how your brain tries to fill in blanks when you're tired? That's what I told myself. But even telling this now, I feel my stomach knotting the same way it did that night. The next morning, when I got home, I shut the bathroom door and leaned toward the mirror to wash my face. My eyes were bloodshot. I was exhausted. I splashed cold water on my cheeks, looked up, and for one split second, just one, my reflection didn't move at the same time I did. It lagged, a tiny fraction of a second, like a skipped frame in a glitchy video. But it was enough to make my heart slam into my ribs so hard I stumbled back. I stood there, gripping the counter, staring at my reflection, waiting for it to move wrong again. It didn't. Everything went back to normal. Perfectly normal. I took a deep breath, grabbed my scrubs for the next shift, and told myself, "You're sleep deprived. That's all." And maybe it was. Maybe I imagined it. But the seventh story, the strangest one I've ever seen in the ER, didn't end with the patient. It ended with me. And I guess the truth is, it still hasn't ended. Even now, sometimes when I'm alone in a dim hallway at work, I glance at those glass doors to make sure they're closed. Sometimes when I'm charting at night, I feel that instinctive prickle on the back of my neck. And sometimes when I'm brushing my teeth before bed, I avoid looking in the mirror too long, because the seventh case taught me something I wish I could unlearn. Not every patient leaves their ghosts behind, and not every story stays in the ER. Some follow you home, some watch from corners you can't see, some learn your name, and some start behind your reflection and wait for you to notice. So yeah, those are the 7 strangest things I've seen as an ER nurse. And trust me, there are plenty more, but these are the ones I'll remember for the rest of my life, whether I want to or not. Thank you so much for staying with me until the end of this story. I know these cases were wild, unsettling, and sometimes downright unbelievable, but that's exactly what ER nights are like. Unpredictable, chaotic, and occasionally haunting. If you enjoyed this story, if you want more real ER confessions, more behind-the-scenes tales, more strange and true moments from the night shift, make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, and share this video with someone who loves bizarre medical stories as much as you do. Your support truly means the world. Stay safe. And maybe tonight, don't stare at your reflection too long.